Well, good afternoon and happy February already, Logger fans. My name is Chris Calloway, joined by field manager Brian Lewis for another edition of Loggers Live here from Logger headquarters. And it feels like we got a lot to catch up on as the calendar flips over to February. I know you're looking forward to Viterbo's opening day in, 6 weeks or so in the middle of March, and the Loggers will be taking the field in about 4 months.
You're way off on our opening day, but that's okay.
You started in fall,
we're
right?
We're 2 weeks away.
Okay.
So we were February 15th, but the grind's about to start for me and everybody else in college baseball. So excited to get going.
Well, maybe not today earlier this week we could have played baseball. Maybe not today. It's a little chilly outside. But we will be thinking of California and 4 new Loggers that we'll be adding to the roster for 2018. We're very happy to welcome in from 2 different schools. Ones that have been very good to the Loggers as of recently in UCLA and San Diego. 2 guys coming in first. Let's start with the Bruins. Jarron Silva, Kendall. What do those 2 guys bring to the table for the Loggers in 2018?
A lot of athleticism. You know, people are probably going to get tired of hearing me talk about the athleticism of this team, but Jarron Silva was potentially a starting outfielder for UCLA last year as a freshman. Had a season-ending injury shortly after the start of the season. He's a guy that brings some pop to the lineup. He's got some gap-to-gap power. He runs pretty well. He was a top 50, I believe, player in the state of California coming out of high school. He's a guy that's going to bring experience. He's going to get a lot of at-bats this year for UCLA, or at least he should. I'm not trying to speak for John Savage there, but he's going to be a big cog in their system, and he's going to be a big part of what we do this summer.
So a guy like Silva, who has an injury history, the grind of a Northwoods League season we talked about before is different than college. With an injury history in mind, how do you kind of approach that as a coaching staff?
Well, I don't know the particulars of his injury at this point, but it's all about communication when it comes to the injuries. If it's something that could potentially linger and potentially flare back up during the summer, we want to talk about it. We want to see what their medical staff is doing at UCLA to keep him on the field and keep him healthy. Translate that to our fine staff that we have here with the Loggers supplied by Gunderson, and then go from there and keep him on the field.
And you mentioned athleticism, Kendall, another one of those top 50 prospects out of the state of California. It's a huge state. It's a lot of great players, and those 2 guys right in the mix.
Well, Kendall, I think, is a little bit of I don't want to say underrated because I don't want to sell him short, but I think he's a guy that not a lot of people are talking about, and he's a guy that can really swing the bat. His tool is the bat. He runs really well. I think he could steal potentially 20, 30 bases in the Northwoods League, provided he can get that amount of at-bats. He's a guy that can play all 3 spots on the infield, primarily a shortstop in high school. He's quality at all 3 spots, and I think he's going to surprise some people out in California. He's going to be right in the mix there for the Bruins as far as getting playing time on that infield. And
we'll shift over right away to the guys coming from San Diego, the Toreros, as you will, from Southern California there. One guy that we almost had last year, Brhet Bewley, and then Shane McGuire going to be joining the squad in 2018 as well.
Brhet Bewley could potentially be a big-time hitter for us. He was a guy, as you mentioned, we almost had last year. He had a little bit of a knee injury later in the season for the University of San Diego that kept him out. He played a little bit with St. Cloud a couple summers ago, so he's familiar with the Northwoods League. He's familiar with the grind, and he's familiar, at least through his teammates, with what we do here in lacrosse because we've had so many Toreros over the years. And I'm excited to see Brhet swing the bat. According to the coaching staff at San Diego, he's probably their best hitter. He's a junior, so he's got some experience. He's going to be in the middle of the order for them. He'll probably be in the middle of the order for us. And he brings a good glove at third base. He could play other spots on the infield, but he probably pencils in at third base. And he's going to swing. He's going to put that barrel on the ball. He's going to swing it for us.
And he's a junior, like you mentioned. Logger rosters maybe have a tendency to skew a little bit younger, freshmen and sophomores. So when you got a guy with some experience, not only in the Northwoods League, but playing ball for a couple more years than the rest of these guys, what do you kind of expect from those guys right away?
Well, the thing about it, I expect them to have an understanding of what the league's like, and then I expect that experience to translate into results on the field and into numbers. And talking back to Brhet Bewley a little bit, I remember speaking with I believe it was Kevin Collard when we had him a couple summers ago, and asked Kevin about him when he was playing for St. Cloud, and Kevin said he just flat out hits. That's all he does is hit. Well, that's what you want to hear, and I think that I'm excited to get him, and then with his teammate Shane McGuire, he's going to bring a big left-handed bat for us as well, and a fine catcher.
And so that's 4 guys now that we're announcing today. Shane McGuire and Brhet Bewley coming from San Diego. Kendall and Jarron Silva from the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. And one of the things you mentioned with all these guys is athleticism, and that's obviously going to play well, but. You think of athletic positions, both on the diamond and in the lineup. There are only so many of those to go around, and so when you're starting to look at who is the most athletic guy at shortstop, the most athletic guy at the top of the order, or how do you kind of when you've got a lot of different options to choose from, how do you kind of build a lineup in a roster?
Well, you kind of, at least for me, I kind of look at what they did for their universities, where they bat in the order, where were they most comfortable. Then you try to have a conversation with them when they get here. Where are you most comfortable? Where and things of that nature. And then you take a little time to see the tools and what they're doing. The first couple weeks, here in the Northwoods League, and then you try to build your order from there. But Shea McGuire is a guy that. We're pretty deep at catcher as of right now in February. Who knows what will happen before opening day. And he's a guy that, even with the names of Corey Lee and some others, that he could push for some starting time, and be a regular guy for us. He comes from great bloodlines. His brother was a first-round draft pick catcher. And I know that Rich Hill and the University of San Diego are really high on Shea McGuire. So I can't wait to see these guys. And when you talk about athleticism, too, the thing about the Northwoods League, which is kind of the grind that we always talk about, is that they can't play every day.
Sure.
You get in that, you're going to play 2 out of 3, you're going to play 3 out of 4, you're going to play 2 out of 4, whatever it is. You get that rotation going, you keep guys fresh, and then you find some time for everybody. I mean, not everybody can be a Mason McCoy and play 72 games a year.
But I would imagine, not saying that any of these guys fit that role particularly, but there comes a point where you have a lot of guys that are, hoping to bat number 3 on their college team, but can only bat one guy on a 3 on a given night. So what's the conversation like when you got to go talk to him and be like, hey, I need to hit you in the 8-hole tonight?
Well, you try to structure it, at least for me, you try to structure it in the context of you might be batting in the 7, 8, or 9 hole, but you're not a 7 or 8 or 9 hitter. And we don't necessarily, we're not putting you in the 9 hole because you're the 9th best hitter in the lineup tonight. We're not putting you in the 9 hole because we want you to hopefully, bunt over a runner for the leadoff hitter. We want you to still do the same things you would do if you were batting in the 3, 4, or 5 hole. It just so happens that I had to write your name in the 8 hole or the 9 hole. You know what I mean? We just try to keep it in that realm because, realistically speaking, most of these guys are, or potentially,
sure,
a leadoff hitter, a 4 hitter, a 3 hitter, whatever it is. There's not a lot of guys that come into this league in general, but especially here with us, that are coming in as 9 hitters. And
I would imagine that there's a little bit of ego that goes along that you kind of got to work with, that mental side of the game too. That we still want you to produce like a number 3 hitter, even though you're not going to be in that spot in the lineup.
Right. Well, and some of that, and now a lot of it is going to fall on Stu Peterson. That's I'm just going to turn it over to him and say, hey, that's the stuff you're dealing with. No, but you're right. And there's always some egos. It's baseball, and guys are confident, and guys have that. But when I played, I kind of had it too. And I feel like that as a coaching staff, myself, Coach Kenny, and now having gotten to know Stu pretty well. We're going to be able to handle that fine. There's no issues with that. I mean, you get to know the kids, you get to know how they act and what drives them, what motivates them, and you learn how to kind of push their buttons per se a little bit. And I think we do a pretty good job of that, and I think it'll only get better with Stu leading the hitters.
Let's talk about these schools in particular. You mentioned Kevin Collar, a couple of people who have been with the teams in years past. I mean, what have you known about guys that are coming in from the West Coast and these big schools like San Diego and UCLA?
Well, as far as the players themselves, I don't know much about them. I haven't had any conversations with any of these guys on a personal level, but we do get a lot of information from their coaching staffs. And the fact, going back to having Stu's out on the West Coast, he's familiar with a lot of these young men, some of them in cases that he's even worked with at times in the past. He has the ability to get out and see him. He has the ability to get out and see him in the fall, go watch him here in the early spring. I know he's excited to get out and do those things. So he brings something to the table that we haven't had in recent past, where he's going to see all these guys and he's going to have an idea of what he needs to do as a hitting coach already before he gets here. So, but Chris has built great relationships with Rich Hill at San Diego and John Savage at UCLA and so on and so forth. When we talk about those teams from the West Coast, he's in contact with them all the time, and they're upfront and honest about all these guys. So he gets all the information. He gives us to us as a coaching staff, and then we put it together.
I would imagine, these schools are going to be starting their seasons here pretty soon, like you at Viterbo. I think Sac City already started last week. Some of those junior colleges are already playing. If UCLA is playing late at night, I would imagine you're flipping deep into the cable to try to find out what the Pac-12 network is.
Yeah, I try to find it right away. So that's something that I tend to do if they're a late game, and especially as you talk about UCLA or USC, we have young men coming from there in different places where they're coming from. So you try to find them, you try to watch them, and gauge what they can do, and sometimes you see things you like, and sometimes you don't. But it's just tough to find those guys in the Midwest on TV, because I'm usually playing at the same time. So that might have to send you out to scout some games this year.
I can watch a lot of Big Ten Network.
There you go.
Do that. Well, we are looking forward to the arrivals of this next crew of logger announcements. We have Jarron Silva and Kevin Kendall coming from UCLA, Brhet Bewley and Shane McGuire coming from the University of San Diego. Looking forward to follow them along the spring and welcoming them into Copeland Park when the logger season comes around. So that'll do it for this edition of Logger Live. We'll have more coming next week, more player announcements, and we just keep adding to that roster for 2018. So for field manager Brian Lewis, my name is Chris Calloway. Thank you for tuning in to Logger Live.